a Vitex bush, and I have 5 very mature ones in the garden and a few babies that I've just started. It's just starting to leaf out. It's just May 3rd, and this is probably the last shrub to leaf out. It's very slow in coming back after winter. The flowers will be a beautiful bluey purple when it's in full bloom in the summer. And the berries is what I use medicinally. And if we could take a look at some of the little leaflets, or I should say stems, there's a few little berries left from last season, and that's the medicine that's used. It helps to regulate the menstruation through regulating the, the pituitary. And it has more of a favor towards progesterone. So it seems to ease out hot flashes and menstruation difficulties, especially when people have excess estrogen in their systems. I usually harvest the berries during the wintertime here in California. Usually January, February is a good time. And then I will crush them up gently, make tincture with them. Sometimes I'll just completely powder them and add them to formula as a powder. I've also crushed them up kind of like at the texture of pepper and use them on my food as a spice, because they're also known as monk's pepper, and they do have a spicy taste to it. So I used it on my food for some time. I haven't done that for a while yet, but it's a nice condiment to add to the food as well.
Did you ever hear the story about them, the reason they call it monk's pepper is because it was used as an anti-aphrodisiac?
That's all the rumors, and who knows. I guess the monks had a problem maybe, and they had to find something. But I really don't know why, if it would do that. I don't know any medicinal reasons if it would do that. So that's why I'm questioning whether or not it would do that. It is a warming herb, so it would seem like it might do just the opposite, because it would add vitality and warmth to a person. So I don't know if it worked for them.
This is one of the great friends of the herbalist, hawthorn berry. You see the characteristic thorns, quite big. If you rip your skin with them, you usually get infected. There's they cause infection. Hawthorn berry we use as a heart tonic. It's full of bioflavonoids, which are found in the whole rose family. And flavonoids help with the repair of the capillaries and arteries and blood vessels, so that the blood can go through more smoothly and quickly. And that means that reduces high blood pressure, because there's no pressure back upon the heart from the capillaries being jammed up and slow. I found that it rejuvenates the fatty oil content of the cells, because you can actually use it for eczema, particularly when the eczema is on the wrist around there. And this dryness on the wrists like that will be a good indicator in the back of the hand for this plant, and it'll get things more oily in those cells. Well, it must do the same for the cells in the blood vessels. I find it's particularly good when the palm is very red tissue, and you press on it and you get blanching. It stays white for a long time. It's not too bad there. And that means that there's a lot of inflammation of the blood vessels or of the red blood cells themselves, and they're all rough-edged, rough-sided, with their lack of oil in the cell walls, and it's like sandpaper they're trying to pass through, because a red blood cell is larger than the caliper of the capillary, so it stretches it to go through. Well, if they're sandpaper sided, that's friction, and that's what happens when it's low on that oil that is in the cell wall. 60% cell of the cell wall is fats. So it lubricates the passage of the blood, and that gets rid of that blanching because the red blood is able to flow back in there quickly instead of slowly. And so that means that it helps balance the LDLs and the HDLs. That's the low density lipoproteins and the high density lipoproteins, which are the good and bad cholesterol, so called. The quote, the LDLs, or the bad cholesterol, is used to throw a patch on the side where there's a rip or a tear. See, this removes the tears because it cuts down on that friction. It causes better lubrication. And but if you didn't have that, then you'd throw down the LDL as a patch. It's kind of like if you've ever been in like a slumlord house and the slumlord throws a plaster on the wall where the tenants have knocked out the plaster and everything, and it's all rough edged and everything. Then the HDLs come along and they sand down and make smoother the wall of the artery and capillary. So they work in tandem, but an excess of LDLs or a lack of HDLs makes rough, corroded, edgy membranes in the blood vessels, and that causes precipitation of the coagulating factors, the platelets and fibrin and so on, and that causes blood clots, and that helps to close up the artery and then cause ischemia, tissue death, because there's no blood getting to the tissue, or the clot breaks off and goes somewhere, causes ischemia because it goes to the brain, or hopefully instead the lungs or somewhere, and causes a small lack of blood to the area, and if it's in the brain, that's like a stroke. So it causes strokes, heart attacks, things like that. Also, sometimes to prevent that, you need blood thinners as well. A really good remedy is sage, or Chinese sage, or Western sage will thin the blood so that those coagulants don't cause the stroke or the heart attack. But this acts on a different phase of the problem, on the irritability of the tissues lessened by the coating of the fatty oils. Also, it's good for autoimmune disease because that's that irritability of the tissues when there's not enough oil in there to lubricate. And also it's good for hyperactivity because that's like an autoimmune disease, very slight elevated like irritability of the tissues makes for the mind to be a little bit irritated. David Winston taught us that. That's, as he said, the heart doesn't store the Shen. This is a heart remedy. By improving the vascular health, it gets rid of high blood pressure, and that keeps the heart healthy. It can be for quite damaged hearts. You need it for a couple years sometimes with some people. Very reliable remedy, but there's other remedies that also act on the heart in different ways.
This plant probably doesn't need much introduction to most people, especially people who are from Georgia. This is a peach tree, and these are young peaches that are coming up on it. It happens to really grow really well here in Ben Lomond, which is in the foothill mountains of Santa Cruz, California, Northern California. And so I have several peach trees. It happens to be one of my favorite fruits. The peach leaf is a common remedy in Appalachia and throughout North America. Native Americans and Native people of white descent who live in the Ozarks and Appalachians use peach leaf for stomach and gastrointestinal complaints. So it's one of the great herbs to use for settling the stomach. But not many people use the peach seed or the kernel. Inside the peach is, of course, a large nut, and if you break that open, inside is a almond-tasting seed, which is the peach seed that is used in Chinese medicine. And this has different properties. Principally, it promotes blood circulation. and it breaks up blood stagnation, blood clots and things of that nature. It possesses hydrocyanic acid, which is also found in loquat leaf, and it's also found in apricot seed, both of which, when it's heated up in fire, will supposedly turns to cyanide, which is not good for you. It's kind of tempting because when you eat peach seeds and when you eat apricot seeds, they taste like the most delicious almonds you ever had. And to think of them as poisonous, well, they probably are. I can only tell you a very funny story, which happened to some of my less intelligent students one day. After I taught a class and taught them about peach and apricot seed, I left my pharmacy and I left the students in there. And suddenly, about 2 or 3 hours later, I got a telephone call. And one of the students got a little freaked out because she said they were going around and grazing on the herbs in my cabinet. And they stumbled on the apricot and peach seeds, and they thought they were so delicious they just started chomping down on them. And then somebody there realized that it's a classified poison. Supposedly they say 30 of those seeds is enough to kill a person. And indeed, it is known to have done that. But somebody called up the Poison Control Center as a result of that. So I get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they want a list of all the students' names, and they spend the whole night calling every one of those students who ingested any of those seeds to warn them and to see if they were still alive or dead. And a couple of them said that they thought for sure they ate more than 30 seeds. And so they immediately rushed them to the hospital and committed them to the hospital. They had nothing wrong with them whatsoever. They left them in there for 2 or 3 hours and realized that they weren't going to die as the books say they're supposed to. And the whole thing is a forgotten incident. So peach seeds only become cyanide when they are cooked, and the hydrocyanic acid will change. At least that's how I understand it. The same principle is found in apple tree bark and cherry bark. And the effect of hydrocyanic acid is to inhibit the cough reflex, so it's really good for coughs. But peach seed, along with dong quai and peony, make a great tonic and used in Chinese medicine for menstrual irregularities to promote blood circulation.
Fringetree, you know, the only real remedy I know for it, there's two. It goes in urinary tract formulas, and it goes in lymphatic formulas.
But it's an old bilious gallbladder remedy.
Is it?
Yeah.
See, I've not okay, so you can talk about that because I've not ever heard it used for that. It goes in it goes in a lot of when the bladder's irritated, it's not really infected, but someone has been eating foods that are irritating or not drinking enough water, and the bladder gets a little mucousy from the irritation, but there's no infection. This is one that goes in the bladder formulas. Also, it goes in formulas for the kidneys when the kidneys are getting have been either overpowered in their cleansing action, and they're just not cleansing in the well as they used to. And this happens in older people, but it also happens in younger people who are just not eating good food, and it stresses out the kidneys. This goes in kidney formulas also, but it goes in almost all Southern traditional lymphatic formulas. It's in there as helping thin lymphatic fluid. You often find it in with, say, red root and cleavers and a little of this to help relieve congestion in the lymphatic system and improve movement of lymph fluid around the body. Yeah, and you had a totally different use I'd never heard of.
Yeah, well, I never heard of your uses, and you never heard of mine, and mine is just what I thought was the established tradition, and indeed fairly southern because it is a southern tree. I don't think it's found north of the Ohio River. It's probably found maybe into Kentucky, but pretty southern. And it's used primarily in the traditions I'm familiar with for gallstone colic, for getting rid of gallstones. And indeed, it is slightly yellow, maybe not as yellow as the wild yam that's mixed in there, but it is a somewhat yellow tree, and the bark is really yellow, which is what they looked for, is that. I can't really see it too well. The inner bark, maybe it's not old enough. And I know William Lassassier considered it his #1 remedy for gallstones, and just in a general formula for gallstones, would be up there with chelidonium, celandine, maybe yellow dock root, stuff like that. From what you're describing, it sounds like it's kind of anti-phlegmatic and maybe
probably.
thickening of the phlegm.
Right.
Phlegm,
Right.
when the bile gets phlegmy and thick and
Mucusy.
sticks in the gallbladder,
Yeah.
and you get stones from that purpose, or you get stones mixed with mucus.
Yeah.
So that's all possible.
Yeah.
So.
It was used for what my mother would call scrofulous conditions.
Oh, geez,
also.
it's interesting because there are these little there's these little swellings here that I was thinking looked like acne or swollen glands or something. They're not very big.
Yeah. So when she was a young girl, she had tuberculosis of the lymph nodes, which was called scrofulous. And she was given a lot of tea to help her lymph, to relieve that congestion. And this was one of those things.
Yeah. Also, I'd say gallstone conditions where the pancreas is involved through the backup of the bile. I think it has a cleansing effect on the pancreas too. So, and it may have a stimulating effect on the pancreas, even as a digestive aid or something. So.
Cool tree.
Yeah. Does it get much bigger than that?
Yeah, you get a little bigger.
We can grow an ornamental from